Hi, everybody, and we're glad that you're here. We have a presentation about grit today, or leading with grit, and I'm Jennifer Shimmick, and I'm presenting with Cindy Domlin, and we're both psychology instructors at ACC, and we have a lot of really good, gritty stuff to share with you. Cindy?
Awesome. Let's get started.
Okay. Okay, so Leading with Grit is the title of our presentation. Just to give a little bit of background of what is grit, this presentation is based on Angela Duckworth's book. She is a psychologist from University of Pennsylvania, and she's done lots of journals, written lots of books. She has a TED Talk that's been viewed more than 8 million times. So it's really a hot topic and something that scientists continue to want to learn more about. So looking at success, Angela Duckworth was really interested in diving into the lives of successful people. She interviewed lots of them from a variety of backgrounds, athletes and teachers and doctors and journalists and, any that she could interview and get information just to see what contributes to their success. And that really, what she found was determination and direction. And this is grit. It's this passion and perseverance. It's stamina, right? Being able to continue on with your goals, even through challenges and adversity. There's resilience involved. And the passion piece is doing something that you love, and not just doing what you love, but you just keep loving it, right? It's not like a temporary thing. It's ongoing. So this idea, this grit is the combination of passion and perseverance. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. When I Google grit, this is the images. These are a few of the images that come up. And a lot of them, they don't look, super fun and easy. They're gritty. They're uphill. There's, overcoming challenges and, pushing through things and climbing through. And so it's work. It's work. Grit is effort. Some background research on grit, and again, this information here is from Angela Duckworth's book, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it. But college students, more grit is a more powerful predictor of graduation rates than conscientiousness about school. Community college dropout rates can be as high as 80%. Gritty people defy the odds. And there was another study that I was reading with my students yesterday that talked about grit and it also being a predictor of college retention for that first year and a half of school, looking at just pushing through, hanging in there when things get really hard. And that's a better predictor over things like the ACT and GPA. Students earn higher grades and they drop out less, or the dropout is less likely when they are interested in what they're learning and their interest align, with their major. And there's this alignment of their career goals and a career path that they're choosing. So when their interests align with their academics, that increases retention and the likelihood that they'll carry on. As far as the work and in work environment, work ethic is more important than talent, right? It's this idea and this mindset that I can continue to learn and develop skills. And I think Cindy has a piece where we'll get into like the growth mindset, and that's part of this. But this effort is a big part. It's not just that though, but it is a big deal. So when people do what interests them in the workplace. Research shows more satisfaction with their job. They perform better. And then in general, in life, 80% of success in life is just showing up, just being there and not giving up, right? So gritty people spend more time and they do not more time and better time, intentional time on a task. So how do we get grit? Deliberate practice. Practice is key, and not just practicing, but you have a goal in mind. So you have a clear goal, a long-term goal, for example. You give your full concentration and effort. You want informative feedback. You receive feedback so you can make adjustments as needed, and you're comfortable with that. You're moving forward and you're always revising and refining things. There's purpose behind grit. Is what I'm doing, does it matter? There's meaning behind it. Is other-centered life. Are you also thinking about others and serving them in some way? How do you view your job? Is your job just a necessity? Is it a stepping stone to other opportunities? Is it the very important thing in your life? And following through on commitment builds grit. So again, just sticking with it, especially if it's something, in particular, if it's something that you love. Gritty leaders create a culture of grit. So when you're thinking about grit, it is for your benefit and for your achievements and for your success, but also it matters to the people around you. It models for them this kind of gritty character. And so if you think about creating a culture of grit in your organization, in any of your initiatives or on your campus, what language are you using? What is common vocabulary or language used within your organization, right? You want a culture that's tough and supportive. And Angela Duckworth, she kind of refers to this or associates this a little bit with parenting too. Ideal parenting is someone who's a parent that's demanding or tough and also loving or supportive. So you have, not just one or the other. So this idea that it's tough, there's a challenge, there's always this, we can do better, we can keep learning and revising and improving. And then also there's a lot of support behind it, and encouragement. Ritualizing things. She talks about focusing on your weaknesses is important. Always thinking about what are areas where you can grow and develop. She talked about the Seahawks and how they had a specific day of the week where they would talk about their weaknesses. They would acknowledge those on a Monday, and then they would make different choices and do something different on a Tuesday. So gritty people show when they're weak, and talking about those areas and being transparent around them helps you improve them. Reinforce an identity of who you are, in your, I think in your area of work and what you're doing every day. Who are you? What is your identity? Putting that language around it and reminding yourself, I went to a conference and they talked about the mission statement, for instructors. When you're doing things, have a personal mission statement. And that way, in your teaching and in your initiatives, all the things that you're doing, you can always remind yourself of, who you are, defining your roles, what's your purpose, your goals, and work within those. So I thought that made me think of that when this brings up identity. And then emulate leaders, not imitate. So anytime you are achieving your goals and you're working towards them and you're striving towards them and you're overcoming obstacles and working through them and you're not giving up, it's important that others around you, right? Not just imitate you, like, oh, that seems to be working, I'm going to do that too, but they actually emulate and they match your achievement, right? So that the culture kind of grows together in success. And so this information here came from an interview that Angela Duckworth did back in 2016, and I thought these were good to highlight. And then I think this is, Cindy, you'll pick it up from here, going into a little bit more detail and introducing some new ideas around this.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Cindy, and I'm kind of looking at this from a personal perspective and then kind of applying it to students and leadership in the classroom. What I think is funny is we've come from this realm of positivity. Those of you that are familiar, we had an initiative on the campus, the Pathway to Positivity, that we've kind of carried over. And grit was the next level, we thought, of kind of like this pathway to positivity. And so when we picked our theme last year, it was like we were gung-ho, we were ready. We looked at grit, and I mean, we thought about, wow, grit involves growth mindset. If you're familiar with Carol Dweck, growth mindset is overcoming obstacles. It's a form of resilience, using failure to press you forward. And then, some of the characteristics of grit, I think you need to press down so we can see does it say? Gritty characteristics when you press, there you go. Yeah, some of the gritty characteristics that we have with grit is, perseverance, which she talked about, resilience, the ability to overcome adversity, courage and passion. What's wrong with passion is great, right? And conscientiousness. All of this got me really excited to start this new level of initiative that we were doing by having our students read the Grit book by Angela Duckworth. These are necessary skills and attributes that students are going to need. It just seemed like the right next step. Why don't you go ahead and slide down? Yeah, okay, so why do I feel miserable? As soon as we started this, I mean, I was miserable. I was grumpy. I was like, this is not warm and fuzzy. In fact, we were having a Pathway to Positivity meeting, and one of our members said, "Yeah, I don't think people really relate to grit. It's not as relatable as positivity." I mean, I found myself. You can hit arrows for each one. Hit the arrow down for each one of this. I found myself griping. I found myself ruminating over things that weren't going well, which makes me want to just isolate from everyone so that I can just quit, right? Because I'm not having fun. So it's like, okay, what is going on here? And the good thing about this is it forced me to really look at the science behind grit. What was going on to make me feel like this? There were a lot of things going on in the fall 23 semester. Just like every other instructor, I had student issues going on with AI and plagiarism and things like that. We were piloting our third textbook in less than 2 years. We've really been driving ourselves through textbooks, trying to find just the right one. And on top of it all, we went into an 8-week semester where all of our courses except dual enrollment went into 8 weeks. So it was a lot. And here's the thing though, not all stress is bad, right? Eustress is the form of good stress that motivates us and presses us forward. So, there were good things happening too. We were appointed to the Success, Wellness, and Belonging Committee, which we were really excited about because we feel like this is another way to continue our initiative on the pathway to positivity. It's more to manage though. I had someone tell me one time the reward of a job well done is more hard work to do. So here I am, I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm not feeling gritty. I'm not feeling like I can persevere. And I began to realize that we can use grit as a cliche, right? You just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going. And by the way, what does that even mean? But anyway, it's not a cliche. Grit is not a cliche. It's a strategy. It's a process. So we've already moved to the next slide, so I will move to the next slide too. What I've got here is like this idea that uh, one of the things that I've found and Angela Duckworth talks about this. This is one of the problems, or I'm calling them dilemmas. The first dilemma I realized is that you can't do everything, and this is not new information. This is something we do in Learning Framework with our students every semester. This looking at opportunity overload. There are so many things that you can do, and you can't do them all. In the book Grit, Angela talks about she talks about it in the form of goals. You have top level goals, mid level goals, low level goals. She even has a quote with Warren Buffett where she talks about where he tells her, you write down the 25 career goals that you have. So you write down these 25 career goals, and then you soulfully search out the top 5. What are your top 5 goals? And then Warren Buffett tells you to scratch off the other 20. And not only scratch them off, avoid them because they are distractions. In 1300, one of the things that we do with our students is I have my students do an inventory of their time, a really detailed inventory, like every 15 minutes, what are you doing? And I find one of two things with students. They either are suffering from this opportunity overload where they have too many things to do, um, or they're not being proactive with their time and they're losing it. They don't know where it's going. So a really interesting question, and I'm going to ask you guys this now, and if you don't mind, maybe write down some notes on this. What are your top 3 values? What are the things that are the most important for you? You could do this over your whole life, or you could just maybe look at your career if you want to, but what are the top 3 values that you have? And then building from this, you would come up with, based on those top 3 values, a goal for each value. What is it? So, and this is a really interesting question because I think with students, they don't think about values of their own. They know what the values of the teachers are, they know what the values of their parents are, but nobody really takes the time to ask them, what's important to you? So they really kind of struggle over trying to figure out, well, what is it that's important to me? And if I only get 3, what would I choose? But choosing a value, and then setting a goal and understanding the difference between this is the thing, education is the thing that's important to me, and the goal is to achieve this thing, whether it's a degree or excellence or whatever. That's the goal. I was in Ron's session and he talked about having a dream, and I thought that's really good because that's one of the things we talk about here, the difference between a dream and a goal. And that is that a dream can sometimes be this ethereal thing, that ephemeral thing that we can't really get our hands on as to what it is. Whereas a goal it is something that's going to require you to take steps to accomplish it. And so in the next level there, it has like action steps. You write down, okay, in order to get to that place where I'm excellent in this, or where I have this degree, or I have attained this career, what are the steps that I need to take? And these can be short-term or long-term type activities that you're going to be doing. But once you start doing that, you start to realize that those steps have to go onto your calendar. You have to make a commitment to show up to those. And you can't have too many of them because your calendar fills up. And so one of the things we also talk about with students is setting boundaries. You're going to have to say no to some things because we just live in this world of opportunity overload. So did you do it? Did you write down some of your values and kind of think about some of your goals? Um, okay, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So that was the first dilemma, just kind of looking at, I'm going to have to say no to some things. I can't say yes to everything and still persevere. Um, so as I was doing some research about grit, one of the things that I came across was this Yerkes Dodson law, and I think most people are probably familiar with this. It has to do with your performance level. You need a certain, I said, not all stress is bad. You need a certain level of stress that motivates you to a task, right? But if the stress becomes too great, then your performance level goes down. And so you're not as good as what you would like to be. As I was researching this, I didn't realize Yerkes-Dodson law is over 100 years old. This has been around for a long time. You may have seen a more current version of this if you'll slide down. This is a more current version that kind of came out when they were talking about something called the sweet spot. So if you'll slide down, I think I have a couple of text boxes here. There's the sweet spot. Okay, so yeah, so in the book by Carol Carter, The Sweet Spot, where she talks about how to accomplish more by doing less. She talks about this sweet spot, and in it she says the same thing that we hear Duckworth saying: decide on your top 5 priorities and say no to everything else. And then also in the paradox choice, Barry Schwartz says you have to limit your choices. So this is kind of reinforcing that idea. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I came across this quote that says, "It's not what you do, but it's how you do it." And they were giving credit to Abraham Maslow. And as I'm going through just kind of trying to verify that this was actually Abraham Maslow's quote, I found out this may be everyone's quote. But anyway, they were giving credit to Maslow for having said this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's talk about Abraham Maslow for just a second. I'm coming to the next dilemma, and that is, how do you become the best you can be? Maslow called this self-actualization. So Maslow made the first academic mention of positive psychology in a paper he wrote, Motivation and Personality, back in 1954. And it wasn't long after this that we really started laying the groundwork for positive psychology. He had a chapter in this, I'm sorry, this was his book. It was called Toward Positive Psychology. And what it was looking for is calling us to looking for man's potential, virtues, and strengths that we could study in greater detail. So this is where Maslow kind of comes in, this aim to, strive towards becoming the absolute best version of yourself, to take your talents and your abilities into your field of interest and find this idea, this peak potential, and peak experience is what I think he refers to it, and have this, what he's looking for is that you would have this on a regular basis. It's dependent on growth rather than satisfaction. So as Maslow was studying this, he later postulated that this is something that people rarely accomplish. Maybe 1% of the population actually achieves this. And it's kind of like, wait, how can that be? As humankind, only 1% can actually get to this level of peak experience. Friedrich Nietzsche said, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. So as Jennifer was telling us earlier, grit is a better indicator of success, and it's consistent trait of leaders. So what we're kind of seeing is this comparison, between this peak experience and grit. When others get bored or overwhelmed, gritty individuals stay the course. It's likened to Maslow's idea of this lifelong journey for self-actualization. So there's a connection between grit, in grit, between passion and perseverance. So go ahead and let's go to the next slide. Oh, go ahead and slide down. I'm sorry. There you go. Okay. Wow, time is flying by. Okay. This brought me to some research that I found in the Journal of Wellness that was about grit and flow. So kind of looking at this sweet spot, uh, and how do we get to it, and we'll talk more about flow. It's coming up. But so passion is a good thing, right? Passion is what is going to get us started on this journey towards that sweet spot. But the problem is, it can also be a barrier, and it can also block us from achieving that. So let's go to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry. So I mentioned flow. Flow is experience when the amount of difficulty that your presently engaged activity requires that exact level of skill one has in that activity. So, that match between your skill and that challenge. So, all right, now you can go to the next one. All right. So again, back to Maslow's quote, he says, "It's not what you do, but how you do it." I was of this impression that passion was this great thing. But what I'm seeing is that passion can lead to burnout, which is our dilemma. It's an obsession can undermine our sustainable high performance, according to Robert Valerian. Angela, in her book, she says, "Enthusiasm is common, but endurance is rare." So grit pushes us. I'm sorry, I'm still back on the other one. Grit pushes us, but like I said, that overabundance of passion can actually be dangerous. Valerian, he cautions us. He says, look, gritty people that thrive on excess amounts of self-esteem from their work are unable to turn it off, and turn it off when they should turn it off, likely suffering from obsessive passion, which leads to burnout. Okay, we can go to the next one. So that brings us to this idea of flow, getting in that state that's somewhere in between this obsession with getting, having this passion to get this thing done, and then burning out and giving up. So flow, being completely involved in the activity for its own sake, the ego falls away, every action, movement, thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using their skills to their utmost. So I have a terrible time saying Jazint Mahali's name, but that's the best I can do. He actually wrote about flow, studied experts and what they were doing that brought them to this level of flow. Okay, next one. Okay, so how do we get in a flow state? We're going to have to balance this this obsessive passion with the harmonious passion. Some steps that he mentioned, and I think Jennifer mentioned these back in her first early slides. Having a clear goal for your action, this is a new one, relative feedback from your performance, a clear and immediate feedback. And then mastering the challenge leads to more skill, identify and engage in progressively more complex challenges, which is your personal growth. So who doesn't love to be evaluated? It's not always easy to get that feedback, but in order to find that flow state, it's necessary. And when I think about this, isn't this what we're striving for in our leadership in the classroom? Is having a clear goal for what are the expectations, giving our students feedback regarding their performance, and then giving them challenging new steps of action to take to help them reach that state. We don't want to burn our students out. We want to challenge them, and we want to encourage their growth in their next steps. So, okay, next one. All right. So, just kind of researching this some more, I came across the stages of flow, the question here, the dilemma here is knowing when to quit. And I know that sounds funny, but quitting is not necessarily terminating, as I had in my little acronym of grit, but quitting it's a breakout point. It's giving yourself a break to take you to the next level. So Benson researched this, and what he had is these 4 stages. In stage 1, he said this is the decision to put significant amount of preliminary hard work and training into it. It is the commitment. And so when I'm experiencing struggle at the beginning of this whole undertaking, that is to be expected. It is part of the commitment. But sometimes we don't even sign up for this. Sometimes it is just involuntary things happen. This involuntary stress can still lead us to these breakout moments. Frustration is inevitable in this first stage of the flow stages. Ms. Holly said we should reframe this and call it the challenge state rather than the struggle stage. No trait is more useful than the ability to transform adversity into an enjoyable challenge, which is kind of echoing what Carol Dweck says in her growth mindset. In stage 2, this is the release stage. So this is the knowing when to quit part. So when you have this struggle, you've been dealing with this issue, there comes a point where you have to take a break. And it's in those moments when you're maybe just taking a few breaths or going for a walk, or you maybe just crawling into bed for a cat nap, where something happens that you let it go for just in those moments that you let it go, solutions come to you. Your attention gets refocused, and if what they actually say, the science behind it is, it frees up your conscious processing. When you take your mind off the problem is almost always when you solve the problem. So I'm just curious, where are you when you are dealing with something, you're struggling with trying to figure out a solution to a problem? Where are you when the solution finally comes? Have you ever thought about that? Where's your best insight? For me, it's in the shower. I don't know what it is about it's when I am the most relaxed and I let it go, and all of a sudden the answers or the insight just seems to happen for me. And then after you have this breakout, this is at the point where your peak performance or peak experience can happen. And then uh, the next stage, it is the new normal. So the peak experience, and we'll see this on the next slide. Stephen Kotler refers to this as the recovery phase. So actually, yeah. So the next one is kind of showing you this is the same idea as Benson's, but it's just kind of putting it into a cycle. See, there's my 20 minutes, so I'm going to have to wrap it up pretty quick here. So he's just putting it into a cycle here. So you have the struggle, or what Zhimytskihali says is the challenge phase. You're challenged with it for a little bit, and then you do these things like people are putting over here. This is great. You know, going for a drive, going for a walk, working out, you know, all of these things that just allow you to free yourself from it and then have that moment of release when those solutions can actually come. And this is what eventually takes people into this state of flow. And then you're in that peak experience, and you reach this new achievement. And in this recovery phase, this is the celebration, the connection to new connections that you've made with either information or with people. And you should be in that phase and enjoy it before you go into the next challenge and the next struggle. So really quick, I only just to wrap it up because I know we only have so much time, but what I found really interesting in this research is these different in this cycle, what's happening in these different stages. And I don't have time to go into it in a lot of detail, but in the struggle phase, just think about it. In the stress stage there's brain chemistry going on, right? There's adrenaline, there's cortisol, which these things can, you know, motivate us, which is good. We don't want it to go too far though, because that's when we get the burnout. Too much adrenaline. You know, we have to be able to take the foot off the pedal, right? Off the gas, give it a break. In the release stage, and the other thing that's interesting here too with these different stages is the brain waves. So if you study brain waves, there's different brain waves that are happening here as well. In the release stage, there's not nitric oxide, you know, where the insight is happening. In the flow stage, there's a lot of things going on there. There's endorphins, there's dopamine, there's adenines, there's serotonin. All of these things are happening. And in the recovery phase, oxytocin, that connector, and serotonin that makes us feel good. And so for me in the research, what I really like to spend more time studying about is what does this mean for maybe students who already struggle with neurochemistry or neurochemical related issues like anxiety and depression and things like that, right? And how could I best help them? If somebody was in sonography, sleep, how does sleep affect these different stages if we're not getting sleep and we're not getting rest? You know, just some thoughts that I had as I was researching it. Okay, so next slide, I'm almost done. uh, Grit and flow. So these two things are connected. While grit brings us to our edge, it's flow that continually pushes the edge out and keeps sustainable performers from falling off into the abyss. Okay, next one. I just wanted to mention in the book in Grit, Angela Duckworth, she does research with a lot of different psychologists that are out there doing research on grit and experts and things like this. And there's a really interesting section where she talks about her work with a cognitive psychologist named Anders Ericsson. And he is the one, maybe you've heard of this, who talks about how experts acquire their skills by putting in 10,000 hours or 10 years of practice. So he also states that experts practice differently than just anyone. They do what Jennifer mentioned in the beginning, deliberate practice, intentional, deliberate, focused, detailed practice that's planned with feedback, you know, with that critiquing from someone that's kind of saying, okay, here's what I see, here's what you need to do. This kind of practice predicts success. But Erickson was skeptical that deliberate practice could ever lead to something as enjoyable as flow. But then she also worked with Csikszentmihalyi, the expert who studies flow. And so what she did is she had this debate between the two of them to discuss, do experts really suffer or are they ecstatic? Long story short, she was really disappointed because they really didn't answer her question. But at the end of it, she came to the conclusion that grit and flow do go hand in hand. Go to the next slide. So gritty people do more deliberate practice. And then if you'll hit the arrow key down, and they experience more flow. So deliberate practice is behavior driven, and flow is the experience, and it is performance driven. So just a couple of things here, just two more slides. The next slide is just a couple of quotes that I came across in some of the research, and I thought this was really interesting. It says different people face struggle differently. Some people have a growth mindset. Others want to shy away. It's a fight or flight. A group struggle is amazing because of this. Disaster is one of the most powerful events that brings strangers together, even those who hate each other together. So can we design a disaster? Another quote that was in the research was creating a space where people feel safe to fail is also an authentic way of designing a disaster into your experience. So what am I talking about? In the next slide. Deliberate disorientations, the idea of creating a conflict. Can we design a mini crisis in the classroom? So I have something like, you can go ahead and do all of them. I have something like this in my class on the when before we start talking about critical thinking, I I do this ropes activity. It's a logic puzzle. I tie my students together, two of them together, and they have to figure out a way to get out of this little tangle without taking the ropes off their wrist or cutting or damaging the ropes. They have to find their way out of this little tangle. And it does, it creates this little crisis because they're like, uh-oh, how do I get out of this? They have different ideas about how to get out of it. And then we watch what they do. Some of them give up. They don't want to try anymore. People from the classroom want to join in and they start trying it and or giving advice to those that are doing it. And what we've done is we've created a crisis. We've got their attention. We've built that little bit of struggle, and now they're ready to talk about critical thinking and its applications in this particular little exercise. Um, there's others that there's the twist at the end where you set up something to appear as if you're going to do one thing, and then you can kind of see that that's not working and you change to do something else. A group conflict, who doesn't love an enemy, where you have a groups that are working against each other to team build. And a false start, again, that kind of the same idea as the twist at the end. um, Making having a bad start and then starting over, looking at what went wrong in the first instance and how would we change that and make it better. Um, so these were just some ideas for the classroom. I think maybe if we have some time at the end, we could talk about how do we do this in the classroom? How could we do more of this? How could we start to kind of maybe create this cycle where we're using brain chemistry, we're using the science of flow to get our students engaged and involved and make those little steps of progress. Okay, and then let's see how we can take it to the campus.
Ta-da! No. So I think listening to the research and between the Angela Duckworth book and all of the other research and the science that is just the layers of science behind this, it's obvious that these things can be taken into the classroom, and you can lead with grit in the classroom through your own activities and your own assignments, and then also through other interest of yours outside of teaching. Maybe that's something that you're involved in on campus. So that kind of brings us to where we are in terms of leading with grit. And here's just some of you may know, but the journey, it involved a lot of grit to get where we are today and the pathway to positivity. And the photo on the left, we were inspired by gritty people. Right. We went to the TCCTA conference in 2022. We heard an author presentation who really shared the science behind positivity. And immediately we were thinking, how can we use this? What can we do? And how can we share this with everybody, students and faculty? So we made a connection, right, with the author, Derek De La Pena, and he was able to come to the campus and share give away some signed copies of his book and give a talk. Also, it gave on the way home from that conference, Cindy and I were on the plane and it was like, okay, what can we do? And we just started making plans, like literally on the flight home. And so we thought we're going to do this innovative grant, and we're going to do the Pathway to Positivity, and we're going to give away student scholarships, and we're going to make this a campus-wide initiative. And it is, and it looks so pretty and yellow and positive, but it's a lot to manage. There's a lot of decisions. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of communication. And so some of that is hard, and it does. And so I think where we are, there's the passion, we just keep loving it. And so we keep doing it. We keep finding new things and new science to share and all the things, but it is hard. And I would say, we definitely had to persevere. There was some challenges and lots of, you know, road, speed bumps, right, along the way. So we went from this initiative, like this idea, this innovative grant, and then underneath our picture is the Pathway to Positivity. So now we have kind of this brand, if you will. And so when we do things on campus, this brand kind of follows us. So this is part of our journey. We had goals. For this year, our theme was grit. It was to share the grit resources and connect with students, faculty, and staff, create an inclusive culture. So a lot of the language that we use involves things like, the culture of grit and hope and don't give up and Pathway to Positivity and positive psychology. And, we try to keep this language and going with whatever we're doing, whether that's serving faculty and staff through a tea that's themed around grit and activities. Positive pop-ups offer students resources, and whether that's videos or a link to maybe a survey so they can learn some more about themselves. We try to get creative in the ways in which we share the information campus-wide. This year, we have the 3rd annual Walk for Wellness. Pathway to Positivity is kind of hosting this in collaboration with other departments on our campus. And so everyone kind of contributes. We involve, counseling, career services, yes, and counseling, career services, student life, active minds, and all of the student clubs and organizations. I think this year we may have some other resources kind of come in and share and contribute in this event. So this is something that we do that's campus-wide. Where we can still push out these themes and some of the science. And then just more of the journey is communications, making decisions together, ongoing conversation. The more that you talk and connect with one another, it really narrows the focus and the direction, right? So that's part of the grit, is this determination and having a direction. And sometimes things start out really big, and then the more that you conversate and get down to like what's realistic and what's an attainable goal, then you can move forward. And that's been very rewarding. I feel like we've achieved a lot in that way. We give a lot of feedback, like, oh, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. Okay, well then what, we just are really honest about steps forward. We refine things all the time. And then just the collaboration, whether that's in the student, these positive pop-ups or the wellness walk that's coming up. We are always collaborating and always giving recognition to the departments that really share in this initiative with us, because it's not something that, we're doing all by ourselves. And so, yes, collaboration and connection is part of flow. It gives you that, I think, momentum to keep going. So you act grittier if you're around people who are gritty, right? Who are you surrounding yourself by? And you can do it the hard way. You can get grit by yourself. It's not as much fun if you do things alone. So this last slide is, find your passion, whether that is classroom related and things, and you want to lead your students, or you want to be part of something else and lead others. Find your people in doing that. And it's rewarding, and it's fun, and it's helpful, and there's always things to learn. And so I think as instructors or in higher education, there is passion, right? You just keep loving what you're doing, and there's always learning involved in instruction and in education. So I
So we
think
would
that's, yeah.
Yeah, we would love your feedback so that we can continue to grow our skills and improve at what we're doing. And so we would love your feedback or your questions or your ideas. I mean, if anybody had ideas about how can we create more gritty situations in the classroom? I think one of the things that kind of struck me is like, like I said, grit is a cliche and we don't really understand its struggle and its hard work. And I think a lot of times in our society, nobody wants to work hard. We just want things handed to us. And so kind of, like reassessing that in the classroom. This is going to be hard and it's going to be challenging, but you're not, we're going to take it in manageable pieces and bite-sized pieces and improve our skills, and we're going to get better, and that's going to get us to those states of flow. So anything ideas you have on that, we'd love to hear them. What do you think, Brian?
Was incredible, guys. I'm really moved by everything you guys have said because there's a lot of just, wonderful things that have happened. I mean, we've had a lot of changes in the last 4 years with how things are done, how things are run. I can think in my subject in particular, I've seen a lot of changes in how my subject is now taught. It's not just face to face in the laboratory environment. You have more hybrid style, you have more virtual meetings, virtual sessions, there's virtual laboratory experiments that are being done, both simulation style as well as lab kit style. I'm going to talk some about that in my talk in the next 20 minutes. Sorry, I was looking at the time. Wow. Because there's a lot of great things that have come out of it. And it's been really neat kind of, interacting with different people, talking about, what kind of experiences they've had and how those experiences apply. So, um, online teaching has actually become more of a passion of mine. So hearing you guys talk about, what you guys have done with grit, I hope I can, have at least an ounce of that same enthusiasm and passion for my talk that I'm going to give in about 20 minutes. So
You're definitely a gritty person, for sure. Like
Don't you? Yeah, go ahead.
For
Sorry.
me, you're one of those, you're one of those people, so you want to emulate their achievement, and, find those people that encourage you to succeed at things, and share new things and teach you new things and inspire you to keep growing in your, your career, your field, your teaching, all of these things. So you're definitely making an impact, for sure.
well, thank you guys.
And it's funny. I did that acronym before I did the research, as far as like griping and ruminating, and that is what I do when I fail. That is what I do. I ruminate over the mistake. It goes, oh, I go, oh, I did this. This was wrong. I should have done this. And I have to let that go. I mean, it's okay to look at that from the standpoint of, this is my own personal feedback. Okay, you can do that better. There's a better way to do it, and work towards doing that, and not getting stuck. Which is,
Oh,
I think, what is one of the dilemmas of grit, not getting stuck and as Angela Duckworth talks about in growth mindset, using that to help you learn from that and move forward. So,
no, definitely. It's one of those challenges that, we've all run into as we've, gotten more and more into, trying to develop our teaching and trying to develop our methodologies and trying to, be as student centered and supportive as possible. So, there's a lot of great neat things. I know COVID's a horrible thing to talk about, and it was a really rough time with the pandemic, but we've learned a lot about what we can, do and how we can support our students more and in much better ways. So that is one of the big positives that take out of the pandemic, is that we've really learned some new techniques and new tricks that have really helped our students.
and funny you should mention that, because that's one of the things about grit that stood out for me too. In that stage cycle is recovery. I think we need to do more celebrating. Look what you've come through. Look what you've been through. Look how you're still in there. You're still going. I mean, I think we get stuck, bad, 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 and we don't celebrate and connect and, the good things that are happening. And that
We
is
don't.
what's going to help us continue to stay in a good cycle of grit. So.
No, definitely we don't. I mean, I'm hoping that we can continue celebrating those things. I was talking to Dr. Ebert about that some as well, and so I know one of her big messages is that we are needing to celebrate all the great things because we've got a lot of great things that are going on here.
Yes.
There are a lot of wonderful accomplishments that our people are doing every day, and we need to champion those people who are doing these amazing, wonderful things. Get the word out. You guys are doing great work. Keep doing it.
Well,
All right.
That's
Anybody else
all
want to
I
add
have.
anything else to the recording?
Thank you all for being here, and hopefully there's some takeaways. If y'all have questions or just want to connect and whatever, yeah, reach out.
This is Erin. Thank you guys so much. I truly enjoyed it, and I enjoy everything that you guys are doing, like, tremendously. I feel like, mindset is everything, and it can either make things really good or it can make things really bad. So I really appreciate all the efforts that you guys have done.
A champion for positive psychology.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, all those are really kind words and encouraging to us. And so any, again, ideas or just conversation, we're always accessible and wanting to, sharing ideas and connection. So definitely reach out. We're always here.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, guys. Let me go ahead and end the recording, everybody.
Okay.
We have a nice little break, actually. So go stretch and get some coffee, everybody, for our next round. So thanks, everybody, and catch you guys later.
Did we finish?